A character shrouded in mystery is a man who's been affiliated with the Umbrella Corporation since the very beginning, Brandon Bailey. But who was he? Brandon attended a university studying virology under his teacher James Marcus, one of Umbrella's original 3 founders. Bailey was learning and trying to understand how viruses work, learning their life cycles, evolution, and how they cause diseases. Brandon was welcomed by Marcus into a eugenics circle consisting of James Marcus, Oswald E. Spencer, and Edward Ashford, the 3 eventual founders of Umbrella. In 1966, a couple of years before Umbrella was actually founded, Bailey set off with Marcus and Spencer to Africa in search of Sonentrep, aka the Stairway to the Sun. They found the flowers while entering some caverns. The team spent 3 months analyzing the flowers, also being subjected to attacks from local tribesmen. They determined that the virus existed within the flowers and dubbed it Progenitor on December 3, 1966. They left for Europe the very next day with samples of the virus. They even had seeds so they could grow their own in their lab. They were able to eventually confirm that the Progenitor virus can reverse lysis in cells, which means it can reverse a cell from being broken down over time due to damage or aging. A remarkable breakthrough for them to figure out, but they came to realize that the Stairway to the Sun needs certain environmental conditions in order to trigger viral production. The only way for the flowers to flourish was on the soil it came from back in Africa, right where they found them in the cave. In 1967, Spencer was having the idea of starting a pharmaceutical company, aka Umbrella, in means to raise research funds. They split the Progenitor samples to have groups working on them at the same time for parallel research. Bailey and Marcus working together, and Edward Ashford working together with his son Alexander. Research was limited for both Bailey and Marcus, so the following year in April they made plans to set out for another expedition to West Africa. Spencer had also hired mercenaries to massacre the Nidapaya so that they could gain full control over the Garden of the Sun. In August they received word that they were successful, so Bailey hastily departed on the expedition on August 20th. He wasn't accompanied by Marcus this time around. Marcus was assigned at the training facility in the Arklay Mountains. Spencer deliberately had them separated to cement power for himself and the company. Sometime later in September, Bailey had to oversee construction for a permanent research post that was being made in the caverns which he was going to be the manager of. The assignment was made so that the Progenitor was going to create samples effectively and have cases shipped over to the Umbrella founders' laboratories. Without James Marcus by Bailey's side, Bailey ended up developing obsessive tendencies. Even though the facility was completed in June of 1969, Bailey felt it was insufficient and demanded more funding to construct even more. Soon the expansion ended up being 3 times the size of the initial facility. An irrigation system had to be constructed in order to stop the flowers from dying off by the effects of the building that was affecting the garden.
The Nidapaya still remained a threat, and the mercenaries eventually got replaced by Umbrella's security service. Construction workers were fired upon completion of the facility and then murdered to protect its secrets. The alterations finished around 1970. Bailey assembled a lab team to extract Progenitor samples. He also ended up having a side project on determining what the exact conditions are to trigger virus production. Bailey kept in touch with James Marcus, who apprised him of his work on the T-Virus project. For over 20 years, Bailey kept working. In the 1980s, he succeeded in determining how to trigger viral production. It was around the same time, however, Bailey received word that Marcus had died. All of Bailey's years of hard work came to a stop, and he sunk into a deep depression. He became broken and didn't care that he wasted his life away. In preparations to leave, Brandon didn't want to go home and simply retire, so he got in contact with any friends he had left. He ended up being the leader and founder of the Connections, a crime syndicate organization based in Munich, Germany, and they were working against Umbrella's dominance in the bioweapons industry. He no longer cared for his founder's eugenic views. Bailey had his organization produce bioweapons to be sold to other criminal enterprises. Oswald E. Spencer, who was behind Marcus's death, planned to execute the entire African lab team to keep Progenitor a secret. A file can be found in Resident Evil 5 with all the level 9 security staff at the facility. Brandon Bailey and all the others were labeled deceased. The BSA, in their own investigation of the group, were able to confirm his survival a possibility. With Brandon Bailey's survival being a possibility, it makes you wonder if he actually had been around the whole time, conducting what the Connections have been up to during the events of Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8, but from the shadows. With a character as important as Brandon, I'm sure we'll hear or even see him for the first time in the franchise. When that day comes, I'm sure he has a lot to say in terms of him finding the 2 most powerful viruses in the series, the Progenitor and the Mold.